Hello, fellow Americans. This is Mr. Steffler, and I'm going to read out loud to you National and Regional Growth, year 1800 through 1844. We're going to start with Section 1, Early Industry and Inventions. I'd like you to note the picture. This picture here is of the Erie Canal. This is called a keel boat, and it is transferring things from the Great Lakes to the Hudson River, which touches New York City, which connects New York City to the Great Lakes. In 1789, an Englishman, Samuel Slater, sailed to the United States under a false name. It was illegal for a textile worker like him to leave the country. Britain wanted no other nation to copy its new machines for making thread and cloth, but Slater was going to bring the secret to America. When he got to New York, he wrote a letter to a Rhode Island investor, Moses Brown. A few days ago, I was informed that you wanted a manager of cotton spinning, in which business I flatter myself that I can give you the greatest satisfaction. In making machinery, making good yarn, either for stockings or twist or any that is made in England. With Brown's backing, Slater built the first successful water-powered textile mill in America. You will learn in Section 1 how the development of industries changed the ways Americans lived and worked. The Industrial Revolution begins. The War of 1812 brought great economic changes to the United States. It sowed the seeds of the Industrial Revolution like the one in Britain that had began in the late 18th century. During the Industrial Revolution, factory machines replaced hand tools, and large-scale manufacturing replaced farming as the main form of work. For example, before the Industrial Revolution, women spun thread and wove cloth at their home using spinning wheels and hand looms. The invention of such machines as the spinning jenny and the power loom made it possible for unskilled workers to produce cloth. These workers were often children, could produce more cloth and quickly. The factory system brought many workers and machines together under one roof. Most factories were built near a source of water to power the machines. People left their farms and crowded into the cities where factories were. They worked for wages on a set schedule. Their way of life changed, and not always for the better. Many Americans, such as Thomas Jefferson, did not want the United States to industrialize. But the War of 1812 led the country in this direction. Because the British naval blockade kept imported goods from reaching U.S. shores, Americans had to start manufacturing their own goods. The blockade also stopped inventors from spending money on shipping and trade. Instead, they invested on new American industries, taking advantage of the country's free enterprise system. American businessmen built their own factories starting in New England. These businessmen and their region grew wealthier. Factories come to New England. New England was a good place to set up factories for several reasons. Factories needed water power, and New England had fast-moving rivers. For transportation, it also had ships and access to the ocean. In addition, New England had a willing labor force. The area's first factory workers were families who were tired of scraping a living from the stony fields. Samuel Slater built the first spinning mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island in 1790. He hired 8 children between the ages of 7 and 12, paying them a low wage. Later, he built a larger mill and employed whole families. As Slater influenced others to start mills, his family system employment spread through Rhode Island, Connecticut, and southern Massachusetts. The Lowell Mills hire women. In 1813, the Americans made the industry leaped forward when Francis Cabot Lowell built a factory in Waltham in eastern Massachusetts. This factory not only spun raw cotton into yarn, but wove it into cloth on the power loom. Lowell had seen power looms in English mills, but had figured out how to build them. Like Samuel Slater, he brought the secrets to America. The Waltham factory was so successful that Lowell and his partners built a new factory town, Lowell, near the McCormick and Concord rivers. The Lowell Mills textile mill in a village employed farm girls who lived in company-owned boarding houses. Lowell girls worked 12 and a half hours in deafening noise. At first, the hours seemed long, but when you went out at night, the sound of the mill was in your ears. You know that people learned to sleep with the thunder of Niagara Falls in their ears, and the cotton mills was no worse, though you wonder what we do not have to hold our breath in such a noise. Young women came to Lowell in spite of the noise. In the early years, wages were high, between $2 and $4 a week. Older women supervised the girls, making them follow strict rules and attend church. Girls read books and went to lectures and even published a literary magazine, the Lowell Offering. Usually they worked for years until they married. In 1830, however, falling profits meant that the wages dropped and the working conditions worsened for the Lowell girls. The Lowell Mills and other early factories ran on water power. Factories built after the 1830s could run on steam engines. Because steam engines use coal and wood, not fast-moving water, factories could be built anywhere, and they moved beyond New England. A new way to manufacture. New manufacturing methods changed the style of work in U.S. industries besides the textile industry. In 1797, the U.S. government hired an inventor, Eli Whitney, to make 10,000 muskets for the Army. He was to have the guns ready in 2 years. Before this time, the guns were made one at a time by gunsmiths from start to finish. Each gun was designed slightly different. If a part broke, the new part had to be created to match the one that was broken. Whitney saw a better way to make guns. In 1801, he went to Washington with a box containing piles of musket parts. He took a part from each pile and assembled muskets in seconds. He had demonstrated the use of interchangeable parts that are exactly alike. Machines that produced exactly matching parts soon became standardized in industries. Interchangeable parts sped up the production, made repairs easy, and allowed the use of lower-paid, less skilled workers. But the new system also required a new style of management, with inspectors to make sure each piece was uniform. Workers who were used to more independence disliked such supervision. Moving people, goods, and messages. New inventions increased factory production. They also improved transportation and communication. Steamboats carried people and goods farther and faster and led to the growth of cities like New Orleans and St. Louis. Robert Fulton invented the steamboat that could move against the current or strong wind. He launched the Clermont on the Hudson River in 1807. Its steam engine turned two side paddle wheels, which pulled the boat through the water. The Clermont was dubbed Fulton's Folly and described looking precisely like a backwoods sawmill mounted on a boat and set on fire. But it made the 300-mile trip from New York to Albany and back in a record 62 hours. Even Fulton had not expected to travel so quickly. I overtook many slopes and sloops and schooners, beating to the windward, and parted with them as if they had been at anchor. The power of propelling boats by steam is now fully proved. In 1811, the first steamship traveled down the Mississippi and Ohio rivers, but its engine was not powerful enough to return upriver against the current. Henry Miller Stove, a trader in Mississippi, designed a more powerful engine and installed it in a double-decker boat with a paddle wheel in the back. In 1816, he sailed the boat up the Mississippi River and launched a new era of trade and transportation on the river. In 1837, Samuel Morse developed the telegraph. This was a machine that sent short and long pulses of electricity along a wire. These pulses could be translated into letters of a message. With the telegraph, it took only seconds to communicate with somebody in another city. In 1844, the first long-distance telegraph wire carried news from Baltimore to Washington, D.C., about who had been nominated for president. The telegraph line spanned the country by 1861, bringing people closer, but the nation's telegraph and steamboats also brought more national unity. Technology and improved farming. Other new inventions increased farm production. In 1836, a blacksmith named John Deere invented a lightweight plow with a steel cutting edge. Older cast iron plows were designed for the light sandy soil of New England, but the rich, heavy Midwestern soil clung to the bottom of these plows and slowed them down. John Deere's plow made preparing ground much less work and also resulted in more farmers to begin to move to the Midwest. The mechanical reaper and thrashing machine was also another invention that improved agriculture. Cyrus McCormick's reaper, patented in 1834, cut ripe grain. The thrashing machine separated the kernels from the wheat and from the husk. These new technologies linked regions and contributed to national unity. With new farm equipment, Midwestern farmers grew food to feed Northeastern factory workers. In turn, Midwestern farmers became a market for Northeastern manufactured goods. The growth of the Northeastern textile mills increased the demand for Southern cotton. This led to expansion of slavery in the South, as you will read in Section 2.